Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm so happy to have you here, and of course, I'm excited to talk about this topic today. I am officially back in Calabria now, which I'm so excited about. I've got so much content planned, and I will say that I keep getting interrupted, so it's going to be a miracle if I can manage to get through this without somebody coming to visit me. I've lived in this town for many, many years, but I typically stay in an apartment on the other side of this town, and I'm on this side now. So it's funny because like a lot of people have heard that I'm back, and everybody knows everybody, so everybody keeps coming over and checking on me and making sure everything's good and if I need anything. And it's very cute. They brought me a lot of food, a lot of goods. My social life here is so robust. I feel like, but it has been a little bit challenging working. I keep getting interrupted, and even a couple of my lessons that I've had this week, I have to keep telling my students like, just a second, I've got somebody at the door. So anyway, all that to say, hopefully we can get through this topic. It is a little bit long today, so we'll see, but hopefully we can get through it without getting interrupted. This is a big topic about food. It's one of my favorite topics. Just like linguistics, that's a passion of mine. The history stuff is a passion of mine, but I love food. At the end of the day, I am a Calabrian girly, and I love, love, love good food. So I'm really looking forward to talking about this with you. The other thing I should say is while I'm here in Calabria, I am planning on doing lots of other videos. I've got lots of things planned, but whether or not they'll actually happen is kind of another story. I ran into my friend Gennaro, who he's got a great organic farm here, and I tried to finesse him a little bit and tell him that I wanted to come by the farm and see if he would let me film some stuff, and he agreed tentatively. So, if that works out, that would be fantastic. I would love to show you, because the farming industry here and just like the way that they do sustainable agriculture, organic farming, all of that is so cool. And I'm just really looking forward to that. So fingers crossed we can get that done. And otherwise, we're going to get into the topic of food, the historical roots of this, the ingredients. You guys know me by now. If you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I love to talk about the historical context behind all of this stuff. So let's get into the topic. And I should say that I am going to cover most of the, let's say, the main ingredients, the most popular ingredients. There are so many ingredients here in Calabria. So I'm going to just touch on the ones that I think are the most iconic and the most well-known, the ones that you're going to see a lot when you come to the region, and then dishes, of course, that go along with these that are made by these ingredients, okay? And as always, I'll provide you with the historical context as to where those things came from, and, we'll go from there. So let's get into the topic. Now, no matter what anybody says about Calabria, one thing they can't take away from this region is that in Calabria si mangia bene, okay? Every single Italian that has ever been here will tell you that at very least, even if they have lots of other complaints about the region, at very least, we have amazing food here. That's not even up for debate. And so this is a really interesting topic if we talk about all the different ingredients, the individual ingredients that have made it into Calabrian dishes, and sort of where these things came from, what makes them so special. So yes, we'll get into all of these details in a moment. Now, something to understand about Calabria as a region is that it has a very long history of colonization and lots of different groups that have invaded or taken over certain areas. And so all of these different groups have left some sort of an imprint, at least in terms of culture, maybe even language, certainly the food, certain ingredients. And so this is something that's really important to understand, because a lot of these ingredients aren't necessarily indigenous to the region, let's say. Now, for most of its history, Calabria was poor, isolated, and ruled by outsiders in many cases. So a lot of the food that Calabrians eat, and really still eat today, we see this a lot, is food that they went out and foraged for. And that's still a really big part of the culture today. If you live here long enough, your neighbors will probably bring you some foraged greens that they found in their garden, and they'll bring them by. This happens all the time. This is something that's really, really common here, and it's something that I love, because when you take these ingredients and you incorporate it into whatever it is that you're cooking, if you like to cook, then you'll see just how distinct the flavors are, because those greens are they're natural and they're indigenous to the region, and they just have a really powerful flavor. Now, because of this culture of foraging and the scarcity involved with the food here, of course, there are historical things we'll talk about later, but this brings us to the idea of what people refer to as la cucina povera, okay? And basically that means like the poverty kitchen. We should roughly translate it to English as that. Basically, these are just really simple ingredients. Calabrian cuisine is not complicated. It's very simple ingredients done extremely well and with strong, bold, deep flavors. In essence, this idea of the kitchen of the poor, I guess we can call it, is ultimately a story of a lot of creativity, resourcefulness, and nothing went to waste. So what exactly did Calabrians have to work with? We'll go forward and look at some of the key ingredients that you would find years ago, but that you can still find today. I think that the number one and the most iconic is, of course, the Calabrian chili pepper, the peperoncino. Now, this ingredient it's what the region is known for, okay? Everybody knows Calabria to be spicy, both in terms of the dishes here, because actually a lot of people don't think Italian food is spicy until they come to Calabria. And I'm somebody that's very tolerant to spice, so it's okay. But if you come to Calabria, be very careful with the red peppers, because in all honesty, it can push you to the edge, okay? There have been times, even for me, and again, like I said, I have a very high tolerance to spice. Even I have been pushed to the edge of my threshold, okay? So definitely be cautious with that. But this is something that you see everywhere. You see them all over the marketplaces. You see them hanging from people's houses. This wards off the evil eye or malocchio. This is just a huge part of the culture. It's part of the cuisine. They integrate it in lots of different dishes. So the red pepper is also considered part of the Calabrian identity in terms of personality and characteristics. Italian people, I think in general, consider Calabrians to be a bit spicy in the way that they do things. So, it's just a huge part of the culture. And of course, I had to put that in the number one slot. The red pepper, a lot of people don't know, is actually not indigenous to this region. It was actually something that was brought from the Americas in the 1500s after the Spanish went and colonized the Americas. They brought back some very key ingredients, including tomatoes and red chilies. Again, tomatoes are another thing that people think are indigenous to this region, but are actually not. They're not indigenous to Italy at all, as a matter of fact. It was something that came from the Americas and, of course, has been incorporated in Italian dishes ever since. From now on, the rest of the order of these, they're not in any particular order. I just had to mention that one first because it is the most iconic. Now, the sweet onions of Tropea are, of course, another really, really common thing that you'll see, especially in this particular province. I am in the province of Vibo Valentia, which famously we have Tropea, which is where these onions are mostly grown. They're a very interesting looking onion because they're longer in shape. They're red, but they're not round red onions. They're much longer and they're very sweet. They often use them raw in salads and that sort of thing, but they also make some soups and various different dishes with the onions. So yes, this is something that you'll see that's very typical. One of my favorite items here that's really common is actually a marmalade that they make with the red onions. It's very sweet and tangy and I don't know, just has really great flavor. If you pair it with the right cheese, it's fantastic. Now, of course, the olive oil. How could I ever forget that olive oil is such a huge part of Calabrian culture. Calabria, especially this particular part of the region, we have a lot of olive trees everywhere. And as a matter of fact, it's interesting because the town that I live in is so known for olive oil that they don't even sell it in the supermarkets. It's funny, it's ironic because you should be able to find it anywhere that you go. But the thing is, nobody buys it in a supermarket because everybody and their dog owns a farm. And so they all have their own access to olive oil, or they know somebody that has olive oil and they can get it for a much better price than what you would buy it at the supermarket. So all that to say, that's not necessarily true in the rest of Calabria. You should be able to find olive oil anywhere you go, okay? But I'm just saying in this particular town where I live, it can be a little bit strange because, you would think, why wouldn't you be able to buy olive oil in the store? All that to say, you can get extremely good olive oil for a decent price. I will say that there is a little bit of forgery going on with olive oil. I'm not going to get into that because that's relatively precarious territory to tread into. But I will just say that, you know, you're guaranteed to get really excellent olive oil if you know someone that has a farm and has it, grows it, cultivates it, all of that stuff. Okay. My recommendation is to get it from a local because the locals really take good care of their olive oil and they produce it really well. They take very good care of it. They store it properly. All of that is such a huge part of the culture. And if you come here during the fall time, like let's say late September, October, around that time, that's when most of the harvest of the olives is happening. And you'll see the tarps that they lay out and everybody's out shaking the trees. They have all these machines that shake the trees. It's just like a huge part of the culture. So all that to say, the olive oil here is fantastic, and of course, they put it in just about anything you can imagine. They preserve things with it, they cook with it, they put it on salads, like you name it, you're going to find olive oil in it. Now, the next ingredient I'm going to mention is the pecorino, which is a specific kind of sheep's cheese. It's most well known in the province of Crotone, which is a part of Calabria. But you can find pecorino anywhere, and it's not necessarily the only place that produces it. There are lots of people that have sheep and work with sheep's milk in order to make cheese. But it's got a really nice, bold, tangy flavor. Depending on how long it's been aged, it can be really overpowering. So, you know, if you don't like aged cheese, pecorino might not be your thing. I personally love it, and I would say that most people here, that's the kind of cheese that they use, as opposed to like Parmigiano Reggiano or something like that that's a little bit milder. The pecorino has a nice, sharp, like tangy zip to it that I like. Now, of course, pork. Pork is a huge ingredient here. It's really interesting because I've been traveling a lot in the Middle East and people don't really eat pork like at all for religious purposes. But here in Calabria, it's a huge deal. Most families, I wouldn't say most, but a lot of families have their own pigs that they raise, and then they end up slaughtering them at the end of the year. I would say let's say at the end of the year or beginning of the new year. And this is a big deal, right? Because then they make lots of different dried meats, soppressata, capocollo, nduja. How could I forget nduja? This is like the most iconic thing about Calabria. But yes, so pork is a huge ingredient. You're going to find it in lots of things. If you're someone that doesn't like pork, definitely ask if you come here and you're looking around at different dishes at a restaurant or something. You want to ask if it has pork because they use pork in many, many, many dishes here. As I mentioned, nduja, we're going to talk about this a little bit later because this is one of the main I don't know that I would call it dishes, but it's like an accompaniment that people put in different things like pastas and so on. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the main base ingredient in this is the pork and olive oil, really. Now, the semolina and durum wheat grows really well in this climate because we have a very sunny, hot climate. So these are perfect conditions for growing this kind of wheat. And this is used in all different kinds of stuff, especially if we're talking about making pastas and bread and all of that kind of thing. It's a really, really useful ingredient. And of course, it's something that's really hardy that people can store for long periods of time. And yeah, it's just an iconic ingredient I had to mention. Now, broccoli rabe or cime di rape is something that you will find a lot here, especially during the fall. That's when I think it's most in season. But it's a very important ingredient in the cuisine here. I mean, they put it in lots of different things. They mix it in with pasta. They mix it in with like various different side dishes with beans and so on. So it's a really, really delicious thing. It's very tangy kind of and spicy. Not spicy. That's not quite the right word that I'm looking for. But it's definitely got a bite to it that I like, as opposed to spinach, which is a lot more mild. The broccoli rabe has a nice back end bite that I really enjoy. So that's something that if you come to the region, you're probably going to find all over the place, especially if you come during the fall and winter months or even in the early spring. That's when it's most in season. And then we have beans. Of course, we have lots of different kinds of beans here and various different kinds of legumes. But the reason that I mentioned beans is because this was one of the ingredients that they had a long time ago, especially during the time of unification when things were difficult and the people became even poorer than they were before. It was a very difficult time for a lot of people, and the beans are so nutritious and hearty, and they really sustain life. I mean, beans are such a complex carb for a lot of people. And so this is just a really important ingredient in a lot of the cuisine here. You'll find it, again, mixed in with pasta. Pasta fagioli is something that's extremely common here. It's funny, you know, I did a video some time ago about like Italian-American food, and we call something pasta fazool, which is essentially the same thing. But it's a different way of making pasta fagioli, which is basically just pasta and beans. Here, it's more like a main course versus in the US it's like a soup. And in any case, the idea is essentially the same, and it's just a really, really common ingredient that you're going to find in lots of dishes here. Now, in terms of signature dishes, this is where it gets really fun, right? So of course we have nduja. I think that this is one of the most popular items and something that is exported all over the place. Basically, if I had to describe it to you, it's like a pork-based pate almost. It's like a spreadable sausage that they put on. They mix it in lots of things. They put it in pasta. Sometimes they even put it on pizza. It's often served on bread and as sort of like an appetizer, let's say. But it's really common here. My one recommendation, because the main ingredients involved are the olive oil, the pork, and that pepperoncino, spicy red pepper that I was talking about earlier. It can be extremely spicy depending on who you get it from, okay? So some people have started to make it a little bit milder because we're getting more tourism and people can't handle the level of heat that comes in the nduja. If you go to a town called Spilinga, the nduja there is really famous and it's also really spicy. So be careful if you go there or if you get nduja from that area. It's great. They're so well known for it. I mean, they have their little Sagra del Nduja, their festival that they do for nduja. Yes, it's very, very good. And like I said, they're the most well known. They export it all over the place, whether that's here in Italy or to other parts of Europe. And I've even seen it in the US, and I think Italy and New York had it. So yeah, it's a really, really delicious item. Just like I said, be careful because it can be very spicy. Now, fileia is a kind of pasta that actually, it's a handmade pasta. It's really common here. And often they mix this pasta with the nduja, okay? So you can find a dish on many menus here called fileia alla nduja. So it's good. It's, again, very spicy. So just be careful with that. But it's the first handmade pasta that I learned how to make here in Calabria. My mother used to make handmade pasta all the time when we were kids growing up, but I had never made fileia. So it's a really interesting shape. I'm going to stitch a video here for you to see. The family that I used to live with, they used to make it regularly. And it's just a very well-known kind of pasta in this area. That's a dish that you're going to see on most menus when you come here. Pasta e cime di rape. Okay, this is definitely a dish that's really common. Now, from my understanding, this is actually a Pugliese dish, but they also make it here in Calabria. Basically, it's pasta with broccoli raw mixed together, and often they add in anchovies, of course, olive oil, and various different ingredients. But it's very good, very hearty, and it's one of my personal favorite dishes. Like I said, they mix the broccoli raw in with lots of other kinds of ingredients, but that one, including beans as well, those two things are probably the most common ways that you'll see broccoli rabe used in this region. Fagioli verdure. This is another really common dish, but you know, the verdure just means vegetables. So this could be various different things. They might mix it in with, again, the broccoli rabe. They could also mix it in with like some foraged greens of some sort. I have seen it with various other kinds of greens, but the point is that it's beans with some other kind of greens. Again, this is a really common side dish that you will see. It's not a main course. It's a common side dish, but it's very, very good. And again, very hearty, something that I personally really love. And I didn't mention the bergamot earlier, but bergamot is also a really common ingredient here and something that they make all different kinds of things out of. I mean, they can use it in everything from marmalades to liqueurs to perfumes in some cases, okay? It's a very common ingredient. And if you buy Earl Grey tea that has that bergamot flavor, Fun fact, a lot of that bergamot actually comes from Calabria. So it's possible that you've already had it if you've ever tried Earl Grey tea anywhere in the world. Now, if you've watched any of my other videos, you guys know that I like the historical side of things, okay? And as I mentioned in the intro of this video, there's a very long history of colonization of the region, various different groups and empires that came in and took over, and certainly were responsible for distributing new products and integrating new items. So a lot of the ingredients that we see here today actually came from those influences. The Greeks brought olive trees, grapes, and a lot of the herbs that we see. The Romans developed a lot of the farming and the road networks that we see. A lot of the infrastructure, the old infrastructure, we can accredit to the Roman Empire. The Arabs introduced most of the citrus, including the bergamot that I just mentioned, a lot of the lemons in the region. We also have mandarin oranges that I'm sure was brought over from there. I'm not sure at the time of making this video, but you will see mandarin oranges essentially everywhere. And they also brought eggplants and sugarcane. Now, when I was doing my research about this, they were saying that the Greeks brought the olive trees, but it's interesting because actually the olive trees come from the Levant. So that's like modern day Syria and Lebanon and that area of the world. So it's interesting because yes, maybe the Greeks brought those things, but those things originated from that region and the Greeks took it from that region. So you see what I'm saying? Like it's a compounding of different items that came through various different forms of colonization. So yes, technically the Greeks were the ones that brought it here, but historically speaking, it actually originated with the Arabs, and they were the ones that were the first to cultivate it. And the Spanish rule brought a lot of new world ingredients. So this, again, is the tomatoes that I mentioned, the beans, the peppers. A lot of these ingredients became very important to people for local cuisine. But perhaps the biggest influence was the poverty and isolation, right? Because for such a long time, Calabria has been one of Italy's poorest regions, and it's possibly still considered today one of Italy's poorest regions, if not the poorest region. And so this definitely made an impact in terms of the way that they use the scraps. Nduja, for example, was something that was developed from using sort of the scraps of the pig meat that they just kind of smashed together and created this pate with, right? So all that to say, it's an act of preservation, making sure that there's no waste, and ultimately letting these original ingredients shine for themselves. Artists and producers, chefs, and young people are starting to really promote a lot of this cuisine online. It's a really cool sort of revival of what so many people have considered to be just basic staple food. I think that Calabria's tradition of natural food items, organic farming, and certainly the global interest in the Mediterranean diet have sort of influenced this revival, and it's definitely shining a light on the region's delicious but also sustainable food traditions, which is fantastic. So that was a long video, probably the longest one I've ever made. So if you made it all the way through, you're a champ, and I really appreciate you. This is a nice blend of history, hardship, all this information about the ingredients and everything that you will find here locally. If there's anything that I forgot, definitely comment it below. I would like to know about your families and the kinds of dishes that your families made. Maybe if you come from a family that's more closely related to Calabria, or if your family's further away, several generations removed from the region, I would like to know what kinds of foods your families were making and what you were raised on. I love reading your comments, and I love getting all of your feedback. I do read every single comment. I swear I might not respond to every single comment because it does become overwhelming after a while, but I really appreciate all the feedback. Thank you for liking, sharing, subscribing. All of that really helps out the channel, and it continues to push me to make more content. I appreciate it so much. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.